Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror, and today I bring you my March wrap-up.
It's coffee time!
March, as you know, has been a crazy month for me because I also went back to Spain for 2 more weeks and I didn't have as much time to read as I would have hoped, but I took advantage of audiobooks. So I listened to 2 audiobooks of books that I really wanted to read, which, funny enough, they were both kind of gothic and I really truly enjoyed both of them. I also read on my Kindle and I managed to read a couple of physical books as well. So overall, I'm really happy because I read a total of 10 things. Granted, from the 10 books, 4 were the Shiverpoint books, which I read for a vlog, and I really enjoyed them. Those are middle grade horror books, but nevertheless, I had a decent reading month considering that I was traveling and busy, so I'm actually quite happy. So today we're going to talk about the books. I'm going to tell you what I thought of them, I'm going to give you my rating, and if you're new here, hi, welcome. We like to rate our books with coffee mugs, and I like to start with the lowest rated book, so we always end up on a positive note. First of all, I thought we would start with the Shiverpoint books. Before we get into the other ones, I'm gonna talk to you about these 4 books in particular, what I thought of them, and how I have ranked them. I mean, the lowest rated book in this series is a 4, so you already know that it's a good series. What you need to know about the Shiverpoint books is that they all take place in the same town called Shiverpoint, and we follow a group of, characters that would have never found each other if it wasn't because they have been involved by now in more than one mystery that they had to solve to save themselves and the town. They're called the Shiver Squad, and they are kids that are very different from each other. They come from very different backgrounds and have different relationships with their parents, and I really love to explore each and every single one of their stories. Let's start with Under a Howling Moon. In this book, we follow in particular Ollie, and it's about to be Ollie's birthday, so he's preparing for the big day, and he has decided that he wants to go camping with his best friends, and his father is gonna come along, of course, to make sure that the 5 friends are going to be safe. The night before they go camping, Ollie tells them a horror story. He's trying to prank them to get them scared before they all go camping. And you know what happens when you cry wolf? When something actually really happens, nobody's going to believe you. They're going to think that you're pranking them. And that's kind of what happens. The kids and the father get to the camping site, they put up the tents, they go to sleep, and Ollie hears something in the middle of the night that really scares him, and somebody or someone or something slashes his tent in the middle of the night, and he's really, really scared. So when the next morning he tells his friends, they are skeptical because obviously he's tried to scare them before. But that very same morning, they realize that Ollie's dad is missing. So they start this investigation. They're trying to solve the mystery of what is this creature that they hear at night. And I really appreciated the kind of a little bit of fresh take on werewolves that this book had. It does lean into the tropes of the werewolf stories, but it has some unique takes on it too. I really did enjoy this book. The only thing that I would have loved to see a little bit more in the book was more of the relationship between Ollie and his dad, because obviously his dad disappeared so quickly that you didn't get to see so much of that relationship. Next we have It Came from the Woods, and this is the first book in the series. So in this book, the author really takes the time to introduce us to the characters one by one so that we get to know them a little bit better. Our characters meet because in the middle of the night, something falls from the sky into a field. Alex sees it falling down and he decides to go and investigate. He thinks it's just a meteor or something that fell from the sky, and he wants to be the first one on site. So when he gets there, he realizes there's all the kids already there, and there is some weird green goo coming out of this meteor. That event is gonna bond these kids for life, and they will realize that since this thing fell from the sky, things in town are changing. There is a series of break-ins, there is some black goo that appears everywhere in town, and the adults are behaving strangely. These books have that found family trope because these kids find themselves in a situation where they have to trust each other and rely on each other in order to solve the mystery and save the town, even though they're very different. And in any other normal circumstances, they would have never even talked to each other at school. So it's kind of like a found family, especially because after the first book, the first mystery, you can see the bond that these characters have that is going to continue throughout the series. I think this series is perfect for people that love things like Nancy Drew and Goosebumps, so this is a series that I will also continue. Then we have A Tap at the Window, and in this one in particular, we follow Riley. So Riley one night from her window sees some kids living Darkhaven Farm, and she's a little bit, confused on why they would be there. And then the next night, she sees a scarecrow in the middle of the fields that looks a little bit sketchy, and at some point she is sure that it's moving. So obviously in this book we're going to investigate scarecrows. Are they moving? Are they committing crimes? What is going on? And we have again our Shiver squad trying to solve the mystery. Of course they want to learn, where do these scarecrows come from? How can we defeat them? But also, like, the background story of the scarecrows was my favorite thing of this book. Also, Riley lives with her grandpa, so in this case we have a child that has been raised up by her grandpa, and I love to see the relationship as well. And like I said before, this book has kids with different types of parents. Alex has a single mom, Riley has a grandpa, so everybody has a different dynamic with their parents, and I think that's also great for representation. So kids are reading these books, depending on what kind of family you have, you feel represented. And the last one from the Shiverpoint books, in my favorite, is Beneath the Ghostly Graves. This one was for me such a good book. I would reread this one, I would revisit it because I thought it was fantastic. In this new mystery, the story is focused on Mo and his little brother. So in Shiverpoint town, there is a legend, a myth of Blue Bessie, and she is supposed to haunt the cemetery. One night, Mo's brother disappears, and they think that Blue Bessie has taken him. So the Shiver squad is going to come together to help Mo and try to find out what happened to his brother and rescue him. So for this, they go to the cemetery in the middle of the night, which is scary, atmospheric, and the way the story progresses is almost like an escape room thing. It was just so engaging, so entertaining, and I love the adventure. I loved all the twists and turns of this story, and this was definitely my favorite. The kids have to solve like riddles to progress in the story, and I love riddles and trials and tests, escape rooms. I'm a sucker for that. I also really love the relationship between Mo and his little brother, because Mo is a scaredy cat, but he's determined to do anything to rescue his brother, and he always tries to be tough and, strong and brave in front of his brother for him, and that was just so endearing. This one, I think in particular, highlighted also friendship and how important it is to be kind to each other. So I think also part of why all of these deeper meanings are in the book, part of that is why it was also my favorite. Now that we have talked about the Shiverpoint books, let's start with the rest that I read during the month of March. The first one that I want to talk about is The Murder Farm by Andrea Maria Schenkel, and this one is a book that I was excited about because it is about a true crime that actually happened. However, I think the way that the story was told was not something that I connected with. This is a short crime novel based on the true story that happened in Bavaria in 1922, and I was unfamiliar with the case, so I just read this as somebody, that has never heard anything about it. Of course, the story is fictionalized, so there are things that have changed from the original story. The story is set in Germany, and it is told by an unnamed narrator. A former resident of this town returns to try to solve a murder mystery, and the story is basically told through interviews that he has with the different people in town and people that knew the family that was murdered. There are also prayers in between chapters, and I think hearing the story from different POVs was something interesting, but this book is so short that it made me like not be able to connect with any of the characters or the story. I don't know if maybe I could not get into it because this is a translated book and the original is in German, so maybe I should give that one a chance because I do speak and read German, but I don't know, I just couldn't connect with the story or the characters. It felt more like a diary and not a novel, which is not a bad thing, but I just felt like I didn't get much out of it. I didn't get much clarity. I didn't really got the full picture of what happened. Yeah, I know that a full family was murdered in a farm and nobody knows who did it, but I don't think I got much of a takeaway from this book. Next we have The Eyes of Darkness by Dean Koontz, and this has been my very first book by Dean Koontz, and honestly, overall, I enjoyed it. I think it was not a bad place to start because this is one of the older ones. I think this is from the 80s, from 81, I believe, the original one. But the edition that I have has been revisited, so some changes might have been made. So if you read the original, what I read might be a little bit different from what you read. One thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that it starts as one thing, more kind of like a paranormal story. That's what it's hinting at. And then we change to something completely different. And I did like that change of tone, which I guess for other people might be something they don't like so much, but I did like that change. The book follows a mother that is trying to process the loss of her son Danny, who died in a terrible accident. She has tried to focus on her work and she helps to put up shows in Vegas, and she is about to launch a really big show that it's supposed to be, you know, basically her big success. But one night while she goes to Danny's room because she is considering to finally get rid of Danny's things because it's been over a year since he passed away, one night she sees on a chalkboard something written on it and it says "not dead." At the beginning she's like, maybe somebody's trying to pull a prank on me, maybe somebody's trying to make me suffer, but she also could not think of somebody that would have access to her house that would like to do that to her. So as more of those kind of incidents occur, she starts to come to the conclusion that it could potentially be her son's ghost trying to talk to her. So she's determined to figure out what happened to Danny, why is he trying to communicate with her, but when we get to the midpoint of the book, there is a huge turn of events. There is a huge thing that changes the plot completely and we move to something different. I'm not going to talk about what it is exactly because I feel like it might spoil a little bit your reading experience if you've never read this book before, but I did enjoy that change. I think my biggest problem with the book was the writing style because it felt very slow and very choppy, and also the characters felt very stereotypical, but we have to remind ourselves that this is a book that came out in 1981, so some of those maybe earlier works also for Dean Koontz were not as good as maybe his later works. Overall, I did enjoy it. I had no problem to finish this in a couple of days, so I will definitely be checking out more books by the author. Next, I read How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kirsten Perrin. So I read this one on my Kindle, and this is a perfect, cozy mystery, and I really enjoyed it. And this one has a dual timeline, which also tends to work well for me. So we are in 1965, and Frances goes with her friends to see a fortune teller. The fortune teller tells her somebody is going to murder you. And Frances becomes obsessed from that day on, and she spends all her life trying to solve her own murder before it even happens. On the other hand, we follow Annie. Frances is her great aunt, and even though she has never met her, she's determined to find her great aunt's killer. Annie travels to this very tiny village where her great aunt was living, and she meets everybody that knew Frances. She meets the people in the village, and you can feel that kind of small town countryside vibe where everybody knows everybody's businesses, but at the same time everybody's also keeping secrets from each other. So Annie's trying to figure out who has motive, means, and opportunity, because obviously somebody from that town has killed her great aunt Frances. The book is really cozy because you have a lot of talk about the murder mystery, the different theories, who could be the killer. There's a lot of different characters and you go back and forth in time. The story from Frances' perspective is told through some diaries that she left behind. So you jump back and forth in time trying to discover who could have a grudge against Frances that could have led to her murder. The premise is really interesting and I was really hooked from the beginning, but I feel like at some point I was less interested in that mystery. I don't know what it was exactly, but I feel like I was more invested at the beginning than towards the end. However, the ending was satisfying to me. I think some clues and things were left kind of unexplained, but I was satisfied with the way that the book ended. The thing is also the characters were very stereotypical. I think like every character had their own part to play and they knew which part they were playing, kind of like the characters from a movie like Knives Out, you know, where every character is a very specific character. But this book does not have the same humor, so you could compare it to Knives Out, but it's not exactly the same thing. Overall, I enjoyed it. It was a great cozy mystery and I would definitely read more books by the author. Next we have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, and because I was so busy during the month of March, I ended up listening to this one on audiobook, and I'm glad that I did because this is one of those gothic books that has a very slow pacing, and definitely for people that struggle with that, if you have the audiobook available, it's going to be a lifesaver. This is a feminist retelling of Camilla that has a beautiful writing, beautiful atmosphere, and it's also a great character study. There's a lot of things about the characters that were so interesting to me. Lenore lost her parents when she was young, and because of the time that she was living in, she knew that she needed to marry somebody with money so that, you know, she would be taken care of. The problem with that is that most of the time you would end up marrying somebody for the benefits, but not out of love. So now, 10 years later, she is very unhappy in her marriage, and she also has not been able to bear children of her own, which is something that it's also kind of a heavy thing that has been weighing on her. So after a decade of disappointments with Henry, her husband, and a secret she's been keeping for him since the last hunt, she feels a little bit like lost, and there is no space for her to pursue her cravings. So Lenore wants more. She wants something more, and that something more is Camilla. Camilla is somebody that after a very mysterious, very shady, very fishy carriage accident ends up having to live in the manor with Henry and Lenore for the time being until she recovers from said accident. And the moment that Camilla enters the chat, you can feel the change in the atmosphere. You can feel how Lenore is affected by her presence. And Lenore starts to feel things that have her a little bit worried because she doesn't recognize herself. And that is perhaps because she never really allowed herself to be herself, because she's always had to be this picture perfect wife for her husband. This is a slow burning gothic romance with two women at its center, and it talks about societal expectations. It also talks about female oppression, and I really love to see how Lenore had so many kind of like inner monologue discussions in her head of things that she wanted, but she knew they were wrong. And it's all about how we have been told the things we should want and the things that we should push away. Basically, Lenore's fighting between complying and being this perfect wife to her husband that she doesn't love, or breaking free from the expectations and just be whoever she wants to be. I love so many things about this book, but it did start to get quite too slow for my own taste, but I think that happens to me often with gothic novels. It depends, you know, what the pacing is, but listening to the audiobook was a blessing for me because I was really engaged even though the pacing was slow, because I was just listening to it. One thing that I was kind of disappointed about is that you don't get to see so much about Camilla, and I kind of hope that she would have been more present because she is the reason why Lenore changed and kind of gave in to her cravings. And I I just wanted to see more of her. I think her presence and learning more about her backstory would have really benefited the story that we had, would have made it juicier, would have made it more like, would have more flesh for me, you know? So I think that's one point that I was a little bit disappointed with. And she's also such a pivotal character here because it made Lenore realize that she has needs, those are valid, and they're not being met. Therefore, something has to change. So I really loved this book. I really enjoyed it. It was not as perfect as I would have wanted it to be. I think more because I expected to see more of Camilla, but I think this is a very strong release for 2025. We have 2 more books to talk about, and the next one is a YA mystery thriller called Mondays Are Murder, and it is by Ravina Guron. And you guys know I have loved her previous 2 books. This is her 3rd published book, and I knew I had to get it the moment it was published. And so I pre-ordered it, and I decided to take this one with me to Spain because I could not wait any longer to read it. When I started reading this book, I realized that it had so many similarities with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder because we have a young girl in her teenage years that is trying to solve a murder mystery, and doing so means talking to people in town, trying to figure out what happened in the past, and it just felt very much like it. So if you enjoy A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I think you're gonna love this book. After losing her aunt, Kay's family moved out of Long Groves, and she kind of had to say goodbye to her friends, her town, but she was also happy to leave it behind because it was a very traumatic experience, you know, losing your aunt. But now her parents are going on a 1-week holiday and they don't have anybody else to leave Kay with, so they decide to leave her with her Uncle Dara, which means she has to go back to Long Grove and spend 1 full week there after not being there for over a year. So she's dreading it, but she's like, you know, I'm just gonna try to make the best out of it. She gets there, her uncle has prepared a room for her, she's excited, but on top of the bed is a note, and that note is threatening her. There is a threat for every single day of the week, ending on her murder on Monday. Kay at the beginning feels like this might be a prank. Somebody is testing her, trying to see if she can solve a mystery, kind of like a joke thing. But she realizes as days pass by that all the threats are coming true, which means somebody's want to try to murder her on Monday, unless she finds out who is leaving these notes under the name of Monday. So who is Monday? Why is this person targeting her? And will she be able to stop this person before it's too late and more people get hurt, especially herself, because she knows, you know, her deadline is Monday. But this story is not just a mystery thriller, it's also about friendship and how friendships change when you are a teenager, when your family relocates, when you go through something terrible like losing a loved one. It is always horrible to lose a loved one no matter what age you are, but when you are young or a teenager, it has a different impact in you because you're still growing up, you're still trying to figure out who you are, and you don't, you know, understand fully sometimes the meaning of death. Kay is also back to the town after being gone for over a year, so the friendships that she had kind of went cold, so she's trying to navigate that as well. And of course, you have a fantastic mystery thriller. You have a murder mystery to be solved. And the way that Ravina talks about the town, the different locations where we go to, it's almost like a treasure hunt. You go from this location to that location to figure out information. And it also made the town so real that you were really immersed. I think Ravina has such a good talent for creating micro spaces where the characters live and can interact with each other. And even though this takes place basically this whole book in one small town, you never get bored. She's great at tension, at creating great twists, suspense, the characters. She's also great at creating red herrings and throwing you off the scent. Like, you think you have things figured out in her books and then you don't. So I really appreciate that. She's one of my favorite mystery thriller writers when it comes to YA writers at the moment. I know this book is kind of big for a YA book, but trust me, the moment you start reading this book, you are going to be hooked. It is fast-paced and you just cannot put it down. I remember when I started reading this book, all I wanted to do is go back to it. I just wanted to know more. I wanted to know where the story was going, and that also tells a lot about the beautiful beautiful storytelling that Ravina has, because it manages to keep you like really at the edge of your seat and interested and intrigued from page 1 up to the very end. And last but not least, we have Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato, and this one I also listened to the audiobook, and I have to tell you, this book was wild. It was uncomfy, it was surprising, and I really enjoyed it. Also, talking about the main character here, like what the fuck, Winifred? Are you okay? I don't think you are. Winifred arrives to Windsor House to be the new governess and take care of the children. But her animal instincts plus her past are not gonna make it easy for her to just become the perfect governess that they expect her to be. The story is told from her own perspective, from her own voice, and it's quite terrifying the way that she tells her own story. It kind of gave me chills because it reminded me of those documentaries where killers are talking about how they did things, and they're talking about it like it's something super normal, like I went Tuesday to the grocery store and I got bread. You know, that's the way some serial killers described how they mutilated someone. So that's how I felt Winifred's voice was, like very cold and collected, and the things that she was saying and describing were completely normal to her, but not to me. Not to us, normal people. Christmas is approaching and Winifred has also all the plans for this family. So I think this is going to be also a great gothic book to read during Christmas season because it is around Christmas. Get ready for an unlikable main character that is not going to stop surprising you as a reader. Talking about that, please check the content warnings for this book because it's very heavy. So there were a lot of things that really made me uncomfortable to read about that I thought were extremely horrifying. And then I am somebody, as you guys know, that has watched and read so many things. But this one in particular had some scenes where I didn't even want to read that. So I'm kind of glad that I listened to the audiobook because I had no choice. I was being told the story, I didn't have to read it on the page. This is probably one of the darkest stories that I have ever heard because it makes you wonder how the people that are around you truly are, because you never really know somebody or what they're thinking about, how dark their thoughts can be. And in that regard, this is a very scary book. The main plot is fairly simple. We have a new governess that arrives to this beautiful manor to take care of these privileged children, and she seems to be a normal person, but she has a very dark past, and the thoughts that she has are very dark, and you kind of also start learning about her backstory, which kind of, it does not justify what she says or, you know, what she does. However, you understand where she's coming from a little bit more. This is shocking. It's terrifying. Sometimes I was in disbelief. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening right now. Like, I was listening to the audiobook and my jaw just dropped multiple times. I was like, Winifred, stop. Now, a couple of times you might have to suspend disbelief because a couple of things happen that I'm like, I'm not sure that would really be something that could happen so easily. However, this is a great gothic, horrifying, claustrophobic story, great atmosphere, and even though it might be slow, it has a great payoff and it's not a really long book. So I definitely recommend it, but this is for readers that are used to more brutal, you know, a little bit more dark and gruesome books. So like I said, please check the trigger warnings. I'm not gonna mention them here because it might be something that spoils things in the book, but if you're need to check them, please do, because this one was a lot more intense than I anticipated. So those were the 10 books that I managed to read during the month of March. I'm quite happy with everything that I managed to read considering I was busy. Let me know down below what you thought about these books if you read them yourself as well. And let me know which was your favorite read from March, which is the favorite book that you read during the month of March. I hope that you enjoyed this video and hearing my thoughts on the books that I read. And thank you guys as always so much for watching. I'll see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!